If your family traces its bloodline to the Indian subcontinent, your surname is hiding a 50,000-year-old secret. For decades, the history of this region was told as a simple story of invasions and conquests. But ancient DNA has just shattered that narrative. We are looking at the genetic fallout of a catastrophic Bronze Age collapse, a mixing of three entirely separate ancient populations, and a social system that accidentally froze the evidence in time. 7 bloodlines, 7 geographic anchors. Stay until number 1, because that name carries a secret that completely rewrites the legacy of the Harappan civilization, and the purest descendants are hiding in the exact opposite place historians expected to look. Our countdown begins in the deep eastern corridors. The next surnames belong to the oldest continuous inhabitants of the landmass. These are names rooted in the soil, carried by families who watched the very first farmers arrive and then outlasted them all. Number 7. Munda Santhal and Majhi. Munda Santhal and Majhi. These names trace back to ancient Austroasiatic roots. In their oldest forms, they translate to headman, the peaceful ones, and the steersman of the river. They are titles of localized, unyielding authority. 50,000 years ago, the first modern humans walked out of Africa and filtered into a completely empty Indian subcontinent. Geneticists call this founding population the Ancient Ancestral South Indians. For tens of thousands of years, they had the entire vast geography to themselves. They were the original bedrock, but history never stays still. When new waves of humanity funneled through the northwestern mountain passes, bringing agriculture and foreign languages, many of these original eastern tribes held their ground. They fortified themselves in the dense forests and eastern river corridors. They formed an impenetrable cultural shield, while the great, organized cities of Harappa rose and violently collapsed in the west. These eastern clans maintained a genetic lineage so ancient and isolated that modern science can still map their exact, undivided ancestral footprints today. They survived the shifting of the world. If your name is Munda Santhal or Majhi, your bloodline does not just live on the subcontinent. Your bloodline is the ancient bedrock upon which the rest of the subcontinent was built. The next surnames sound like local administrators, quiet managers of southern estates. But written into their DNA is the story of a massive ancient collision, a blending of two worlds that created an entirely new civilization in the deep south. Number 6. Nair, Pillai and Menon. Nair, Pillai and Menon. These names trace their linguistic roots to Malayalam and Tamil titles of regional nobility, martial authority and land stewardship. In their oldest contexts, they literally translate to leader, the king's men, or the record keeper. For generations, colonial historians assumed the southern half of the subcontinent was entirely disconnected from the great Indus Valley cities of the north. The DNA proves them wrong. Around 4,000 years ago, as the northern rivers dried up and the Harappan civilization began to splinter, large populations migrated south and east. They moved down through the geographic funnel of the continent and collided with the deep ancestral South Indian hunter-gatherers already living. This was not a conquest, it was a profound integration. These two ancient peoples, the original Eastern bedrock and the Indus refugees, mixed heavily, forging a new genetic identity that researchers now call Ancestral South Indian. They built the great maritime empires. They engineered the complex Dravidian language families. They became a martial and administrative aristocracy that successfully held off northern empires for millennia. They are the living legacy of a Bronze Age merger, carrying a bloodline of such intense, guarded creativity that it continues to echo globally today, most famously through a quiet man raised in Pennsylvania who grew up to direct some of the biggest psychological thrillers in Hollywood history. His full name is Manoj Nelliyattu Shyamalan. If your name is Nair, Pillai or Menon, your bloodline is the Iron Vault of the South, the exact point in human history where the first South Asians and the exiled Harappans became one. If this is the kind of history you want more of, if you want to know the actual origins of your ancestors instead of the sanitized myths, make sure you subscribe. We track the bloodlines the history books forgot. The next surnames belong to men who turned geography into a fortress. These are names associated with ledgers, village administration, and quiet management. But behind those titles lies a story of survival in the high plateaus of central India and a social mechanism that accidentally defied time itself. Number 5. Patil Deshmukh and Kulkarni. Patil Deshmukh and Kulkarni rooted in Marathi, and ancient administrative Sanskrit. These titles translate literally to village headman, leader of the district, and the keeper of the family records. They are the ultimate names of localized control. When the Indus Valley Civilization began to fracture around 1900 BCE, refugees poured southward out of the drying, northwestern river valleys. But they did not just walk across a flat map. The Indian subcontinent is a geographic funnel divided across the middle by the massive rising volcanic rock of the Deccan Plateau. As migrating groups pushed into this central highland, this landscape isolated them. The deep valleys and raised plateaus became natural walled cities. And here, the genetics of South Asia did something completely unique. Research suggests that around 2,000 years ago, the widespread mixing of ancient populations largely stopped a rigid social system of endogamy. The strict custom of marrying only within your own specific community locked the genetic doors. These families became the stewards of those isolated districts. By keeping the records controlling the land and enforcing those strict community boundaries, they inadvertently turned their own bloodlines into biological time capsules. Modern geneticists have discovered that the differences between neighboring communities in this region can be staggering. It is a direct result of thousands of years of strict endogamy, preserving ancient Indus and hunter-gatherer DNA in perfectly distinct layers, completely untouched by the later empires swirling around them. If your name is Patil, Deshmukh, or Kulkarni, your bloodline is not just a family tree. It is a living, breathing archive of the Bronze Age, locked away in the highlands where the rest of the world could not reach it. The next surnames carry a reputation for absolute defiance. They are names wrapped in mythological fire, worn by the warrior clans of the western deserts. But the DNA reveals a much more ancient global origin for their martial legacy. Number 4. Chauhan. Rathore and Solanki. Chauhan, Rathore and Solanki. These names echo through the annals of Rajput and Gujarati history. Their roots dig deep into Sanskrit, referencing sun worshippers, charioteers, and defenders of the realm. Tradition holds that these lineages are the Agnavansha, clans literally born from a sacrificial fire pit on Mount Abu to protect the world from destruction. Whether that is true is debated. What is not debated is the genetic reality. Roughly 4,000 years ago, nomadic pastoralists from the vast grasslands of the Pontic-Caspian steppe swept down through the northwestern mountain passes into the subcontinent. They brought horses, wheeled chariots, and a brand new genetic signature. But the DNA proves they did not erase the locals. They merged, these incoming steppe warriors, intermarried with the remnants of the Indus Valley Civilization who had held their ground in the west. This massive Bronze Age collision forged the population researchers now call the ancestral North Indians. They became the militaristic backbone of the western frontiers, forming an impenetrable wall of steel and blood against endless foreign empires over the centuries. If your name is Chauhan, Rathore, or Solanki, your bloodline is the living synthesis of the ancient Indus world and the horse lords of the Eurasian steppe, a lineage forged in the ultimate genetic fire. If you want the complete list of the 50 rarest surnames covered in our historical archives, grab the free guide linked in the description. But stay right here, because what comes next is the part most people miss. The next surnames are associated with temples, ancient texts, and quiet devotion. But the language they have preserved for millennia is actually the echoing ghost of a Bronze Age migration, connecting them to half the modern world. Number 3, Sharma, Trivedi, and Dwivedi. Sharma, Trivedi, and Dwivedi. These names represent the custodians of the oldest religious frameworks, translating literally to joy or shelter, and the strict knowers of the 3 Vedas and 2 Vedas. Their roots are anchored in the absolute deepest layers of Sanskrit 4,000 years ago. When the steppe pastoralists pushed through the northwestern corridors, they did not just bring new DNA. They brought a language, an ancient rolling tongue born on the harsh grasslands of the Eurasian steppe. As these migrants integrated with the northern Indian populations, that nomadic language evolved. It gave rise to Sanskrit, and eventually to Hindi, Urdu, Punjabi, and Bengali, because it shares the exact same ancestral language tree that moved west to create Greek, Latin, and English. The linguistic connection between northern India and Europe is not a metaphor. It is a documented genetic residue. The families who carried these surnames became the ultimate phonetic guardians of this new language. They did not just write it down, they locked it in their minds for millennia. They memorized and chanted the foundational verses with such terrifying mathematical exactness that the ancient pronunciation survived completely intact into the modern era. It was a linguistic purity so profound that when the father of the atomic bomb watched the very first nuclear detonation light up the New Mexico desert, his mind immediately reached for the verses these families protected, quoting the Bhagavad Gita. "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." His name was J. Robert Oppenheimer, but the words he spoke belonged to them. If your name is Sharma Trivedi or Dwivedi, your bloodline is the vocal cord of the ancient world, the living library that kept the language of the steppe and the wisdom of the subcontinent alive, coming up the genetic anomaly pulled straight from the dirt that completely dismantled a century of established history. But first we must look at the survivors. The next surnames belong to the families who watched their world literally turn to dust, yet refused to abandon it. They are names synonymous with modern enterprise, worn by the ultimate pragmatists of the northwestern frontiers. Number 2, Khatri Arora and Bhatia. Khatri Arora and Bhatia, rooted in the ancient regions of Sindh and Punjab. These names evolved from Sanskrit and Prakrit titles, denoting weavers, river valley merchants, and a highly specialized warrior trader caste around 1900 BCE. The great Indus Valley Civilization did not vanish in a dramatic flash. It suffered an agonizing slow-motion collapse. The vital monsoon patterns violently shifted. The massive life-giving river systems began to dry up completely. Starvation set in, while millions of their neighbors fled, migrating deep into the south to eventually form the Dravidian empires. These specific populations stayed behind in the suffocating northwestern corridors. They stood in the ruined baking brick streets of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, and they adapted when the steppe pastoralists arrived through the mountain passes. Centuries later, these local survivors did not surrender. They integrated. They mastered the new Indo-Aryan languages, absorbed the new genetics, and maintained absolute control over the shifting continental trade routes. They became the indispensable economic bridge between the ancient Middle East and the rising Indian empires, moving lapis lazuli, spices, and cotton across the known world. If your name is Khatri Arora or Bhatia, or if you carry the blood of the Sindhi merchants, your bloodline is the ultimate anchor of the Indus. You are the descendant of the men who stood in the ashes of the Bronze Age and simply bought and sold the New World for over a century. The origins of the Indian population were trapped in a bitter political war. Two completely opposite stories fought for dominance. One side insisted that a group of conquering outsiders called the Aryans swept down from the northwestern passes and built Indian civilization from the ground up. The other side fiercely defended the exact opposite, that the Aryans were entirely indigenous, that they were born on the subcontinent, and that civilization flowed outward from India to the rest of the world. Both sides had their textbooks. Those sides had their political agendas, and then ancient DNA entered the battlefield in the quiet village of Rakigari in the modern Indian state of Haryana. Archaeologists were excavating what was once one of the largest ancient Indus Valley urban centers ever discovered. Deep in the cemetery dirt, they uncovered the remains of dozens of individuals. Only one yielded viable genetic material, extracted directly from the dense petrous bone of the inner ear. It belonged to a woman who died 4,500 years ago. She had lived during the absolute peak of the Harappan civilization, surrounded by meticulously planned street grids, baked brick drainage systems, and vast trade networks. In 2019, scientists finally published her genetic sequence. The result completely dismantled both political narratives overnight. This ancient woman carried absolutely zero-step ancestry, none. The massive migration that would eventually bring the Indo-Aryan languages and reshape the genetics of the North had not yet arrived. She was pure, unmixed Indus Valley DNA, a profound combination of the ancient hunter-gatherers and the early farmers who had built the great cities together for the first time in modern history. Scientists had a pristine genetic snapshot of the people who actually built the Harappan civilization before the collapse. And when they ran her ancient DNA against the billions of people living on the subcontinent today, they found her closest living relatives, the purest genetic echoes of the northern Indus Valley, did not belong to the northern warrior clans. They did not belong to the northern priests or the western merchants. The purest descendants had migrated hundreds of miles away. As the rivers dried up and the cities died, they carried the blood of the fallen empire into the deep south where their names are still spoken today. The final surnames on our list sound like peaceful cultivators. They are titles tied to the earth, worn by the lords of the floods and the masters of the southern soil. But the DNA proves they are something much older. Number 1. Velalar, Gounder, and Irula. Velalar, Gounder, and Irula. These names are deeply anchored in Tamil and Dravidian history. In their oldest forms, they translate to the dark ones of the forest, the lords of the floods, and the protectors of the earth. They are the titles of specialized agriculturalists, tribal custodians, and ancient landowners. When geneticists compared the 4,500-year-old DNA of the Rakigari, woman against modern populations, the highest genetic affinity did not point to the people currently living around the ruins of her city. It pointed straight to the deep south. It pointed specifically to the Irula tribe, a fiercely independent indigenous community living in the forests of Tamil Nadu and Kerala, and to the traditional agricultural castes scattered across the southern states as the Indus Valley Civilization collapsed. The core population did not simply die out. They migrated. They walked hundreds of miles south, carrying their agricultural mastery, their Dravidian languages, and the pure genetic legacy of the Harappan world into the southern peninsula, while the northern population stayed behind and mixed heavily with the incoming steppe pastoralists. These southern migrants merged with the deepest, oldest layer of South Asian hunter-gatherers. They built an entirely new civilization in the south, isolated from the massive northern invasions that followed. They preserved the genetic blueprint of the lost cities so perfectly that scientists literally use their DNA today as the baseline proxy to understand who built the ancient world. They are the living ghosts of the Indus. If your name is Velalar, Gounder, or Irula, your bloodline is the ultimate plot twist of human history. You are the direct, unbroken descendant of the greatest lost civilization of the Bronze Age, hiding in plain sight. 7 surnames, 7 geographic anchors, 7 corridors leading back through the ashes of the Bronze Age. Some began with an impenetrable eastern forest, some with a phonetic memory of a nomadic tongue, and some with the survivors of a fallen empire walking south to start the world over again. Your name is not just a name, it is a clan, it is a territory, it is a biological time capsule holding 50,000 years of survival. Drop your surname in the comments and tell me which clan, kingdom, or line your bloodline comes from. And if you know the story your family carried out of the ancient world, say it. Those stories deserve to be heard.